Hey there, Happy New Year and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld adventure in the Tropical Rainforest with the Believers of Boyo. Last time we left off after fighting off several infestations, one of them rewarding us with Kyle, our latest recruit, and we also advanced Brandon all the way to the rank of Acolyte, and with only a few more points of honor needed, he might just get himself to the rank of Knight in this episode. Before we get to that, however, you may have noticed we are starting off today's episode paused, and that's with good reason, because we are on a tight schedule. You see, at the end of the last episode, we received this quest right here, the Red Meeting, and after reading through all of your comments on that video, I think the consensus is to accept it. And of course, we will do so for the xenogerm implantation. In other words, we are planning to turn one of our people into a Sanguophage. Now, unfortunately, there is a bug that can happen in these Sanguophage quests if you do not yet have Deathrest researched. Death resting is what Sanguophages will have to do from time to time. They are very much like vampires in that regard, and even though death resting itself can be done entirely without having death rest researched, I have encountered this bug a few times now, where this quest simply does not give you any kind of reward unless you have this technology unlocked. So, with just 2 days on the clock until the quest expires, we now need to unlock the 2000 point research death rest, and here is how we are hopefully going to achieve that. First of all, starting right now in the middle of the night, we are going to mine out an additional section to our hospital. You can see we have also already stockpiled some steel right next door, enough steel to now pop down 2 additional research benches. We have also set research as the highest priority task not only for Kevin but for Brandon and Maniac as well, and so the 3 of them should hopefully get us the 2000 points required in due time. As you can see, we only have about 1.7 days left and maybe a few hours extra because the meeting obviously does not begin immediately once we accept the quest, so let's hope that our 3 researchers here are up to the task. In the meantime, Tuk is busy in the kitchen making fine meals. Yes, after 10 episodes we are making the switch, but this is done more so for food efficiency reasons than it is for luxury, because as tunnelers our colonists get mood bonuses from eating insect meat and or fungus, and with fine meals we can ensure that they eat both in one meal, or if the insect meat eventually runs out, that they still get the mood bonus from eating fungus while only making half the meal out of fungus. For the other half we can then use regular meat from whatever we are hunting. And to ensure that at least the fungus supply remains steady, we are now increasing our underground fungus farm. We are definitely also benefiting from the fact here that Nutrifungus is really not all that work intensive. It takes about 12 days to fully mature, and during that time we really don't have to take care of it at all. We don't need any light to grow it, thus we also don't need any power, and it is immune to blight, which in my opinion does make it a rather underrated crop in this game. Definitely something to keep in mind, even if only for animal food. Now, in the evening we can check back in with our researchers. We can see 24 hours are left, and we are about halfway done with our research. Unfortunately though, now it is time to go to sleep, and we don't have any wake up, go juice or other enhancements lying around. The best we can do is the quick sleeper trait on Maniac, who together with Brandon can be seen continuing work early on the next morning. In the meantime, with our fungus farm expanded, our next project is temperature control. As many of you have pointed out in the comments, the holding the door open method is less than ideal. Temperatures in that small venting shaft were routinely reaching higher than 60 degrees Celsius, and some of our animals were wandering in there frequently too. By any means certainly not a terrible risk, but we are now constructing an open roof vent to the outside, which unfortunately had to take these proportions because of muddy terrain underneath, otherwise a single tile or 2 probably would have been enough. Still, temperatures are now nice and equalized, and enemies will have to break down both a wall as well as a cooler to get inside, and if we wanted to, we could even install a few vents to make things even more difficult, but honestly I don't think that that's going to be necessary. In the meantime, our quest timer is just about to expire, and you can see it at the bottom of the screen. Our research project is not yet completed, but don't worry, as we accept the quest here we are still right on schedule. We just need to have the research completed before the meeting officially begins. And well, here we are, Death Rest has been unlocked and the Sanguophages have not even arrived yet, so we have just unlocked a few interesting gadgets and constructions that we will talk about later. For now, let's go back to microelectronics and wait until our guests arrive. And indeed, just a few seconds later, here they are, 3 Sanguophages on their way to Red Chapel. In hindsight, a very fitting name for our colony, and eventually, after Sanguophage number 3 has finally arrived too, the meeting begins. Safe to say, I'm excited to see how this goes. In the meantime, we continue to expand our hospital. I'm actually quite liking the idea of having multiple research benches, but let's ensure we have a bit more space to fit them all. The Sanguophages meeting then comes to a premature and rather interesting end. Instead of being offered to turn one of our people into a Sanguophage, their leader now wants to join us, but let's postpone that decision for just a moment here and take a look at who we're dealing with. Stats-wise, we are looking at someone who could prove to be useful as a researcher, crafter or constructor, and with the steadfast and optimist traits, he will most likely never have a mental break. The most important aspect about this person, however, is of course the fact that he is a Sanguophage, an ageless, deathless superhuman. Obviously, there is a bit more to it. An ability like Coagulate, for example, fits extremely well with the Believers of Boyo, as it allows the Sanguophage to immediately heal a large number of injuries. The Sanguophage itself is also completely immune to disease and able to recover from most injuries in the game, which again fits the theme and also the biome, the disease-infested tropical rainforest. On top of all that, Sanguophages make for great melee fighters and potentially strong psychcasters. However, for all of those benefits there are prices to pay. Sanguophages do not like sunlight and they are extremely afraid of fire, which they are also very vulnerable to. Not to mention that in order to keep using all of their powerful abilities, they need to regularly drink other people's blood. In that sense, it is probably fitting that our potential recruit here is a member of a cannibal blood-feeding cult. But don't worry, the blood feeding can also be done in a slightly more humane way. It is definitely not required to go all evil vampires with Sanguophages. And a lovely detail here, our potential recruit also venerates elephants, and I would say that makes a choice that probably was very clear right from the beginning even easier. Who would we be to reject someone wishing to join us? And so let's welcome our first Sanguophage into the colony, a Sanguophage by the name of Vulek, as always chosen from the list of patron supporters in the naming rights tier and above. And now that we have full control over him, we also have access to a few of his abilities, such as Blood Feed, the Sanguophage's way to fill their hemogen bar, which is required to use abilities like Coagulate, for example, the aforementioned super healing power. On top of that, we also have a few combat abilities like Long Jump Legs or Piercing Spine, but, and this is arguably the most important ability, we can also implant the Sanguophage gene into somebody else. Now thankfully, Vulek here does not currently have his genes regrowing, which is what happens if you use this on somebody else. If he did, then we could still use this, but it would kill him. Vulek, meanwhile, can still give this to a single person of his choosing, and so the question now becomes who to give it to, a question that I would like to pose to you guys. Obviously, I did have plans for the recipient prior to this episode because I did not expect the quest to go the way it did, but since it did, we can now make this choice together. In my opinion, there are 5 candidates who would be more or less of interest. The first one would be Wyatt, who would first of all receive an even further boost to his already very powerful melee skills. The problem for him, meanwhile, stems from the pyrophobia, because being deathly afraid of fire does not really play well with wielding a plasma sword, so we would need to find something else for him to use. Finally then, he would also receive a small psychic sensitivity bonus, definitely useful as a level 6 psychcaster. Speaking of level 6 psychcasters though, Light would obviously also benefit immensely from this, and in his case the fact that Sanguophages can self-heal scars and injuries would be crazy good, as it would for example allow him to self-heal the burn scar on his brain, a scar that is drastically reducing his consciousness and with that several other abilities. Now he will unfortunately not be able to regrow his eyes, but still, if the way of Boyo is indeed also about healing and improving, then Light might just be the most suitable candidate. However, if the way of Boyo is about healing, then we also have to take a look at Kevin, who as our resident healer would obviously benefit tremendously from the Coagulate ability, not to mention that the more medicinal nature of extracting blood from other people would fall right down his alley. He too would also be able to heal from a few injuries, although I'm not entirely sure about the asthma to be honest. And on top of it all, Sanguophages also receive bonuses to the social and intellectual skills, which, next to the medical skill, are Kevin's top skills. The combat utility would of course mostly be wasted on him, but let's not forget that he is a level 1 psychcaster, and a potential increase to his psychic sensitivity might just prompt us to pursue that a bit further with him. Such an increase might also be useful for the already psychically sensitive Brandon, and his jogger trait would also synergize very nicely with the Sanguophage's fast runner gene. A boost to the intellectual skill would obviously also be useful for him, an increase to his melee combat capabilities meanwhile not so much. A small boost to the social skill meanwhile could be good for trading with the Empire, something we want him to do eventually. Overall though, he might not have as much of a case as the previous 3. And that brings us to option number 5, the wildcard, Ellie. Only 5 years young, she too could already become a Sanguophage. However, with no idea how she develops and which traits and passions we will eventually be able to select for her, this might be a risky choice. Who's to say that she's ever going to become a melee fighter, psycaster or researcher or anything else even remotely benefiting from being a Sanguophage? But it would undoubtedly give our colony's youngest a head start. The question only is, does she really need it? But, like I said, that is a question that I will leave up to you guys. For now, let's make some progress, and perhaps we can do so with the appearance of 4 Thrumbos, and obviously we're going to start hunting them immediately. A quick berserk pulse from Light gets 2 of them occupied with each other, but just a few seconds later we unfortunately trigger the wrath of the entire group, as Light hits one of the animals with his Psychic Slug Psycast. And so he jumps back into safety and we start shooting. As you can see, we have assembled everyone who can hold a gun for this, and even though that is not quite enough to fully take out a Thrumbo before it reaches Wyatt, the damage is quickly piling up and so the first animal goes down. For number 2 then, we use Maniac's Stun Psycast, and that should take care of things. And indeed, here we are, 2 Thrumbos down, 2 more to go. And those 2 are thankfully still fighting amongst each other, and since it does take the 2 of them a while to finish that fight, we are using the downtime to begin converting our Sanguophage Vulek. Thanks to his steadfast trait, we can only achieve a minus 15% certainty reduction here, but that is still enough so that he will not be able to fully recover from it the next time we can use the ability. Still, it will most likely take a while until he sees the ways of Boyo. Thrumbo number 4 is then successfully shot down in the early evening, and with that we now have plenty of meat, Thrumbo fur and 4 Thrumbo horns coming in, a successful end to a rather eventful day. To wrap it up, we can then also claim the blood torch that the 3 Sanguophages left. This is an object that we will never be able to build ourselves, but it does give all Sanguophages in the vicinity a +2 mood bonus. With Night Owl Dimitri, we can then also see the full benefits of our fine meals containing fungus and insect meat. The insect meat provides a +6 mood bonus, the fine meal a +5, and the fungus a +3, so a grand total of +14 from a single meal. Needless to say, we can expect the believers of Boyo to be pretty happy for the foreseeable future. On the next morning, our new and improved hospital is also slowly starting to take shape. At the moment, the plan is to have one half of it for research and drug and medicine production, while the other half will house our patients, both animal and human. A short while later then, we receive yet another quest from the Empire. For a change though, this one does not promise us any honor. Instead, we would be able to choose from one of 3 rather substantial rewards, and especially the archotech eye here looks promising. All we have to do in exchange is to defeat 16 man-hunting Fenriers, a remnant from the Vanilla Factions Expanded Vikings mod that I still have installed, since both Tuk and Squigs are still using armors from that mod. And after a bit of thinking, I decided to accept it for the aforementioned archotech eye, mainly also because we are now receiving 6 cataphract soldiers from the Empire to help us out, and all 6 of them are considered expandable. And to be perfectly honest, that might be for the best, considering that Fenriers are extremely powerful creatures, and so it definitely hurts to see that one of the cataphracts is now beginning a fire-starting spree. I suppose that's what you get for accepting the help of a pyromaniac. Now we're going to have Wyatt stay behind to take care of those fires. For a change, as a melee fighter he is not needed in this one, we will gladly have our guests hold the front line. And, well, the results of that come early and unexpected. A Fenrir just ripped off the head of one of our allies, and with that there were only 4 capable of fighting, and the Fenrir's onslaught continues mercilessly. I think the fact that 16 of them are able to survive for this long against this much firepower tells you all you need to know about them, even if another one of our allies just went down, but thankfully did not die just yet. And I do fully realize that this was a missed opportunity for Volek's coagulate ability, even though it is not the soldier currently bleeding out who is our next casualty, but with the fight lasting all the way into the evening, someone else had to go down eventually. and so only 2 Imperial soldiers are left in this fight, and thankfully that is enough. As you can see, Tuk also narrowly escapes being mauled to death, and so finally the gunfire stops and all animals are defeated. And as you can see, Tuk did actually take a few serious blows. Time to get all of those injuries patched up. Our pyromaniac also conveniently picks this moment to stop his fire-starting spree, almost as if they wanted to avoid the fight. Well, I guess it did pay off for them in the end. The rest of the evening then is spent treating the injured and burying those who were not so lucky. Eventually that's going to be 2 more sarcophagi filled. As Kyle and Volek then hack away at one of the Fenriers who briefly got back up, we have an infection to report. However, it is on one of our guests and we don't really have a chance to treat it either, as the death of this last Fenrir now officially completes the quest, and with that drops in our rewards and forces our guests to leave. Doing repair work in the rot stink of all of those Fenrir corpses then unfortunately also causes Dimitri to develop a lung rot, and if left untreated this can in fact be fatal. Thankfully we have a good doctor on hand with Kevin, and so we should not see this cause any further problems apart from the pain and breathing issues listed here, and then in 5 and 8 days respectively the condition will vanish on its own. In the meantime, sarcophagus number 5 is filled with the second corpse of our Imperial allies, and somehow this must have gotten Squigs into the mood. Either way, a short while later we learn that Tuk and Squigs are lovers yet again. Perhaps she just took pity on him, who knows. Either way, Ellie's parents are back together and Tuk now finally has another use for that love enhancer. Let's hope that their relationship lasts a little while longer this time around. And while we're at it, also let me know if you would like to see the 2 of them try for another child. I had honestly hoped for another couple to emerge at some point, but it seems like we somehow just can't stop recruiting men. So it looks to me like if we want to have another child, Tuk and Squigs will have to be the parents yet again. And while Kyle is then doing his best burning corpses in the rain, we have another quest pop up. It is the first quest that would give us information about our relic, the Staff of Sin, so obviously we are planning on accepting it. Sending 7 people out to explore an ancient complex should not be too difficult, especially not since they will be allowed to use a shuttle to go back and forth. Before we launch the expedition though, let us first expand our storage room a bit further in the evening. And Brandon has also constructed an excellent quality double bed for Tuk and Squigs, so let's get their new bedroom up and running before the night sets in. With the storage room fully expanded, on the next morning it is time to once again overhaul our temple. I think it is about time to dedicate a bit more space to the heart of our ideology, while at the same time we are also carving out 4 small separate prison cells. After all, we will most likely capture a few more people at some point in the future. Thanks to good mood, Dimitri then also receives a surgery inspiration, which reminds me that we still have that archotech eye lying around, and once again I would like to know who you think should receive it. I think the obvious candidate would clearly be Light, since he has lost both of his eyes. However, he is honestly faring pretty well without it as a pure psycaster, so the alternative would be to pick someone who actually benefits from the sight improvement, and that would be someone who utilizes the skills shooting, melee, medical or cooking. Those are the 4 skills where having a better than normal eyesight actually has noticeable benefits, and with cooking and shooting, Tuk already fills out 2 of those and might therefore also be a suitable candidate. So again, as Kevin receives a trait inspiration here, let me know who you think should get the eye. And with our temple, well, not entirely finished yet, but on a good path, let's make the cut for today. For a change, we also don't have any fan art this week, but I suppose just like me, you guys had better things to do over the holidays, so let's jump right to the end here. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.